Kendrick Sampson, welcome. Welcome to The Accidental Activist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It is so good to have you with us as we get this season 2 underway. We're going to get into all the good stuff about you, your activism, your childhood, your motivations. But before we get there, I do have a question for you that is a burning question that I think academics and philosophers will be pondering for all time. It's a simple question, but I want you to think before you answer it. Are you team Damon or are you team Stefan?
Oh man. Going back.
I'm taking you back.
I think I was Stefan.
Oh, for those who know what I'm referencing, you know I'm talking about the Vampire Diaries that Kendrick was a part of, one of the biggest teen dramas, teen love affairs that most people have. And if you know, you know. And if you don't know, go watch the show. But Team Stefan, I don't know how I feel about that.
I always go for the underdog. I always go for the, I'm like the one that everybody misinterprets and they think he's just evil, but he has motivations,
We're gonna have to continue this conversation offline because I don't know how I'm feeling about this. But it's good to know, and everyone on the production team is now planting a red flag by you that you chose Stefan and not Damon.
I'll say, really, my character was Jesse, and I'll tell you what, the only thing I was worried about back then was Jesse keep going, because I had to pay my bills. So I was team Jesse. I ain't even gonna lie. I was broke, and I was like, I'm coming back for another episode because I need the money.
I'm not mad at you for that. I'm not mad at you.
Team
not
Jesse.
even
team
not
bank
even
account.
Like team bank account. Obviously, Vampire Diaries is one of the high points of your career, but let's take it all the way back to the beginning. Houston, that's where it all started for you. Talk to me about growing up as a biracial kid in Houston and how that shaped your identity.
Yeah. I mean, I today, I understand the term biracial, but I don't ever describe myself that way. I think a lot about what race is and what whiteness is and how it was created as an oppressive construct. And so I don't necessarily, see it. I know that race is a construct, right? Absolutely. So I don't necessarily think I'm biracial. I just call myself Black, right? But I did, have a white
mom. Did they
mom.
see you as Black, though?
Exactly. Well, yes, I haven't ever. And here's the thing, and I get this question all the time. Nobody's ever come up and been like, man, I know you white, but what else? You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody's ever been like, So I haven't, it wasn't until I got to LA, to be completely honest, where white people were like, man, maybe you should grow out your hair so people know you Black. And I'm like, well, you didn't have no problem figuring that out. So why I gotta prove it? But I did, I grew up with a white mom. I grew up with, a Black dad. I grew up with Mexican family, and I had, a lot of questions, and everybody else did too. Yeah, I had questions of like, because my dad taught us, we were watching Roots in like 3rd grade, and all of these identities, all of these factors that I was learning about led me like, white people must be like, so I'm like, and my dad, I'm like, you must have hated white people. Like, you must hate white people. The way he grew up, just, in rural Louisiana, and the stories that I would hear, torturous. And, that was my main thing. I'm just like, well, why did you marry a white woman, and had to explore a lot of why Black folks question my Blackness, right? And why, even though my dad was like, you Black, like, and don't touch nothing in, he was like, don't touch nothing in the store. He used to tell me that the FBI would frame me if if
I left. Had those real conversations about race and privilege and where the lines are.
Well, there wasn't, privilege wasn't even really a concept, not in everyday folks back then. So it was more along the
But I guess the
lines of
difference
like,
between black and white, you know, and even if it
yeah,
was
I definitely
expressed,
understood it, but I didn't understand it in the
sure.
context of privilege as I do now. I think back then it was like, you know, I knew that we had made it out the hood right before right when I was born, right? Hood adjacent, but still, you know, we made it.
Still moving.
Yeah, and I had a lot of brothers and sisters. I have 7. I think there's 7 of us total. And I said, I think for a reason. So, you know, and they were mostly brown skin, dark skin, and there were questions, you know what I'm saying? Like, why do we have different parents? Why, you know, and walking into places where people would talk about my mom, and I was a nerd. I was like super nerdy. I was like big ass glasses with like
I
leopard
don't
print, because
believe it.
you know they were, I think, called tortoiseshell, but I thought they were leopard print because I liked animals. I was a nerd. Like high waters, like it was a different.
This is an image, Ken, that you're painting.
Big teeth. I had the same size teeth in the front and the same size ears and the same size head as I do now, but then it was all concentrated right here because I was a child, like right in the middle of my face. And you know, when people would make fun of me and be like, "Ah, your mom is white," or whatever, I most of the time I would question it. I'd be like, "Oh, why do they think that that's funny?" But I would go back to my book. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. I was just like, I guess they don't like me. I'll live, you know. But it definitely, I think, made me feel like a misfit, right? Like I didn't fit in my family. I was very clear that I was the only speck of color in the room a lot of the time. I don't know what just happened.
Are you good?
Yeah, something. It just a window popped up in front of this one, so I
Okay.
hope it didn't mess anything up.
No,
But either way,
hopefully.
yeah, it would make me question a lot. And even still today, you know, I always explore identity in myself, other people, just so that people are intentional about it, so that I'm intentional about it, so that I understand it a little deeper every time. My dad was abusive, so I try to dig into that, why, you know, and look at the factors that led up to, especially, you know, growing up in as in the foster care system, and before that orphaned on the street. So like, talk about houseless, like like in rural Louisiana, going through the integration of schools. My dad's 74, 75. I fought in the Vietnam War, right? So I do my best to dig into white supremacy, how, you know, how that affects us, colonization, toxic masculinity, all those things, privilege that I know now. I had a sense of it, you know, that we might be in a better position than my brothers and sisters. So why is that, right? Now I'm going to a private school instead of a public school. What does this mean? Why can we afford this now? I ain't complaining, right? but
you're
you know, now
questioning and you're
always,
processing
yeah,
the whole
always
time.
curious. I think that's probably the benefit of it, is it made me always curious.
So I guess the question is, being the nerd, always processing. I know that becoming an actor, because you're clearly very aware, being an actor would to many people not seem like the obvious choice for you. And I know that you contemplated actually going in and studying law. How on earth did you end up becoming an actor there? I mean, there was a chart, you drew a chart, and there were pros and
Yes,
cons.
yeah. Yeah, I was a strange child. I think 6th grade. So my mom always had us in the arts, right? And I found out later, another privilege, right? Because I realized a lot of the schools we were going to, they were taking out the arts. First thing to go.
Yeah.
So she would find different things outside of, I mean, and it was anything. It was, you know, track, anything that could get us out the house. She was a single mom, and not bothering her while she was trying to work. Boom, let's do it. Yeah, she's like, okay, cool. As long as I can afford it, And I ain't gotta, extend myself any further. So, which, kids, so you always got to extend yourself further. And she finally, probably, I think it was 5th grade, 6th grade, I found acting. I found out that because she had us in like musical theater, she had us in uh youth programs at church. Sunday would be from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Oh,
at
wow.
church, because that was the day she could just drop us and be like,
Yeah.
they'll be safe.
Yeah.
And so she was always trying to find different activities, and well, I said that I wanted to act because I saw these commercials and stuff like that. And then it was my own space. I didn't have to, my brother was always with me in some capacity. And we always fought, like fist fought every time we were in the room together. So I was like, oh, this is my own thing. I don't have to sing. I don't have to, that's my family's thing. Music is like, they play the piano, all that kind of stuff. I play, but that wasn't my pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
So I found my own thing. I was like, I ain't looking back. I could make up these little characters, and I was always making impressions and like coming up with these stories. And that was my way to hold court. That was the power that I had. I was a nerd, and I was always in a corner. I was a super introvert. So when I could tell a story, when I could tell what I was reading or something that happened during the day, that was like my power time. Like I've got the stage. And then
You got the spotlight.
And if anybody interrupted me, I was gonna throw a tantrum. I was like, why? When I finally get So when I found this little space that was mine, I was like, all right, I'm gonna stay here. And it really felt cathartic, and it felt like something special. And that was 5th, 6th grade. And then fast forward to 9th grade when I got to high school, and they were like, you got to pick between. So I also had a passion for like, being, I did a lot of things. I loved animals. So I wanted to be a veterinarian. I had all these things. And finally it landed on either law or because I liked putting together these, arguments that said, so-and-so is innocent, or this was right or wrong. And like,
and exploring and
I loved the research. Yeah, I love the research and the exploration, but I didn't ever want to be stuck in an office. That's kind of what it boiled down to. I was like, if this whole thing is research, that's not what I like. I like defending people, right? And you see on TV that that's what lawyers do. So it was a little deceptive. And when I started really digging into it, and what went into the day-to-day, I did a little T-chart, like you said. Put a little T-chart with my pros and cons of either acting or law. And I even thought about like all the things I wanted to do before. I'm like, I'm gonna be an astronaut. I was like, I see these things on TV. I could play all of them. Why do I have to, and I
have to pick one.
Yeah, I saw people like Harry Belafonte, affecting change. When I was looking back, Sidney Poitier that I admired, and I was like, I can do that. If I want to fight for people, I'll just do what they're doing. Oh, look at Martin Luther King, look at Malcolm X. I'll just do what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing, but I'm gonna do it. And then I could, play a lawyer on TV if that's what I want to do, or in a film. So easy peasy, I'm done. And really the choice came down because acting competitions and debate competitions were in the same system. Okay. So the competitions were split at whatever the venue is into debate and speech. And speech was all acting. Debate was, presenting arguments. And so I was like, I can't do both events at one time. So I'm gonna choose. And I chose.
So you choose that lane. You say, this is my path. You eventually, you come to LA. You come to LA without any connections, which, and this is a city which, runs on connections. What were those early days like for you?
Yeah, so the first day I got here, my mama had a like a boss's boss or something like that. She was like, he has a sister in LA and you got to meet her. And so that was the first person I met when I got there, and I thought she's like the COO of this production company. She's gonna be incredible, and she's gonna put me in movies, and I'm gonna be famous, and I could go back to I could go back to Houston, and I could be bi-coastal. I was like,
you had the plan down.
That was my plan. And I got to the dinner, and she was like, all right, well, you could go to church with us on Sunday. And I was
And
like,
you went,
what you trying to do, lady? I need money. I'm trying to survive out here. But I did go to church with them and ended up like becoming family. So while I didn't know anybody and I didn't have any connections really in the industry, she didn't give me no jobs or anything. She taught me incredible values. Like there was no better grounding that I could have had. That's God. Like that is like that's the first person I met, and she's still my sister to this day. To this day. So I am forever grateful. And then I met my mama through her. A lot of people think mama was my biological grandma because we looked alike and we were always together. But I actually met her when I was 18.
Did you meet her in the church? How did you meet her?
I met her in the church. Like the first day I went to church with her, she was like, go sit next to my mother-in-law. And I'm gonna take this out because it's driving me crazy. She told me to sit next to her mother-in-law. Nobody was sitting down. It was just literally only her in the audience because we had come to church early. Mm-hmm. And she was like, go sit next to her. And so I went in there, all these empty seats, and I was like, hey, you in my seat? And she was like, what? And when I was like, I'm just kidding. Marilyn told me to come out over here and sit by you. And she like slapped me on my arm and was like, boy. And then we were best friends. And literally after that, she knew I didn't have anybody to, celebrate my birthday with. And I was here alone. I got kicked out of the place that I was staying in because this white woman was like,
this is the dog story, the dog of the state.
Yes, this is the pre hashtag Karen. She was a whole Karen. And the police called the police on me and everything. And I probably weighed 150 something pounds soaking wet. I was a little kid. I was 18. I was lanky, not a muscle on my body. And she was like, he's 6'4", 190 pounds. And he's threw my dog against the wall. It was wild. And thank God I had witnesses there with me. And that helped me like move out and everything. And she had to give me my money back, which was a huge blessing. Mm-hmm. And then I floated around for a while, month and a half, something like that. Not too long, nothing crazy, 2 months or something. But for an 18-year-old kid, but I had prepped for that. I had gotten kicked out the house for probably a year, half a year more. And I used to live out of my truck and, different people's houses and stuff like that. So I had some experience in Houston too. So I wasn't too worried about it. And then I moved in with her after, like literally when she cooked me.
You moved in with mama?
Yeah, when she cooked me my birthday meal, she presented the choice. She was like, hey, I know you're struggling right now. I lost my husband last year. She was 88. She had lost her husband. She needs help around the house and I needed help. So we became partners in crime.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Church is still important to you?
Spirituality is important to me. A spiritual life is important to me. Church is very, very complex. My relationship with church is complex.
Okay.
But I definitely have a strong spiritual life and pray. I pray to God. I meditate. I've read the Bible back and forth. I've studied.
That's more than most folk.
Yeah, Islam. I've studied a lot of things.
Let me ask you this: you clearly, as you mentioned, maybe not church per se, but the values and those Christian values, which through the community you formed in LA, were came to be central to your life or strengthened. You had those within you, and then you get to LA, and my understanding is You were offered some jobs in those early days that you turned down because they just didn't sit well with you, with your values.
Yeah, I said, well, I mean, that was before, right? Even like sixth sixth grade. Wait, no, ninth grade. Ninth grade, I got an audition, and I was uncomfortable with it. I
What
thought
was the role?
all like it was like 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and they were all like naked and fucking, and I was like, this is,
Like,
y'all, these are children. I'm like, I don't, and it was like, nudity required and stuff, and I was like, nah,
mm,
y'all tripping. Um, and I'm even thinking about my mom seeing it and stuff. I was like, nah. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, but this is the audition. You can't." So I left. I told them I went in the room. I told them that I was uncomfortable with it and that I
mhm,
couldn't audition for this. And so, and I think it was at a showcase. And so, they had already. This was not like a preliminary audition. This was a callback,
mhm.
and they get direct time with the director and everything. And back then I'm like, man, that's crazy, like my life might change.
This could be my break.
Yeah, and then I saw the roles and I was like, and they gave it to us on the spot, which is crazy. And I'm like, for kids, this is just not right. So I talked with my mom about it, and she was supportive of me leaving. So I left, and the director gave me another role. It was like a featured extra spot, but I was ecstatic. And yeah, so I even before that, I was still surprisingly, I with my dad and my mom are not perfect, right? Like, not by any means. I think we used to argue all the time, have epic fights. Um, you know, but I think my values really came from them. Not, Maryland enhanced the values, but um with all their with their negative side and their negative values that they champion, sometime the positive values were deep, like deep,
Mm.
and health, and like growing your own food, composting. I know how to I know how to plant my own garden in the back. I know how to take care of I can survive. I, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I think it's invaluable there, because there's no other explanation in my head for why I was turning down roles before I even started my
Well, you
career.
you really were had a basis,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
How did the community you formed in LA, how did that help move you into the activism?
So, do y'all hear that?
No. What do you hear?
They just started construction outside of my
Oh, I can't hear it.
good. No, cool. They're stopping right now. I'm like, what is this?
Oh no.
They said they weren't gonna be back for another month.
Mm.
Anyway, you asked,
How did your
oh, the
community in
community in
LA
LA.
lead you into the activism you do now?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it was things like that, right? Like Maryland instilling strong values in me. The people that I met, I started, going to the temples and mosques and trying to find my religion and exploring LA and who I am and what I believe, and what my purpose is here, because it's a struggle. So it's got to be some
Mhm.
purpose. I ain't about to be going through all this and nothing come out of it. Y'all tripping if you think this. I'm like, this is awful. I'll go back home. Um, so I wanted to get really solid in what was my purpose here, and I ended up going to this Ethiopian Bible study with this youth
No
Bible study
way.
for like 4 years. That was my social life. I ain't had no money, and I was paying maybe $500 in rent, which I found out me and Mama were splitting evenly. Like, neither one of us. We both thought she was like, well, he got this white mama, so he must be all right. He's gonna be paying his rent. And I was like, she must be rich. She got this beautiful place on this hill. Man, she been there for 20 years. So she was paying nothing. So we was in there legit roommates, 88 and 18. Like, so I wait, what was I talking about? Oh, my purpose and having values. So they instilled all these beautiful values in me.
Oh, the drilling.
It's okay. They instilled all these beautiful like values in me, and I think a lot of that came from my upbringing, and still today, I think I was really intentional, and because of the struggle, sitting down and breaking down what I believe. And that was my favorite thing about this Bible study, is these kids would bring all different translations, versions of the Bible, English translations, their own like other language translations, and they would break down verse by verse. We would sit there from like 10 p.m. to 1 o'clock in the morning, and then go eat. We would find, some cheap diner or whatever to go grub and talk more. And it was, we could spend the whole time, the whole 2-3 hours on one verse, just being like, that don't make no sense. And why are they talking about gay people like that? Like it was literally like, oh, well, actually this, if you say it this way and you talk about it this way and put it in this context, it makes sense. But I think the way we've been hearing about it in the church ain't right, and I could curse, I could say whatever I want, and they not sitting there judging me. And it was a beautiful place. Like, that probably was the inspiration for the safe spaces I want to build today for our people, right? I want us to have autonomy over our stories. I want us to have autonomy over our wellness. And I've dedicated, a lot of time and energy with my co-founders to create this thing, to create safe spaces for people so that we can break down things like that and hold each other accountable, and in a place that's more generative and not like tearing each other down.
And I want to talk to you now. Let's dig into the activism in your
Well,
own.
actually, even and I'll even say this is serendipity. The first person that I met outside of Maryland was this woman, Julissa. Well, she was a kid at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going to prom with her and everything. And I didn't know at the time she was taking lessons from the activists. Like, she was at a school, a magnet school, where she was taking, I said lessons, but classes from activists in LA that I would later that taught, about, like, the first Maryland introduced me to this theater company that was started and named after Paul Robeson, the Roby Theater Company.
Yeah.
And then Julissa would teach me the things that she was learning in school from radical folks, activists that were talking about socialism and like all types of stuff, and the difference between this and that. And I found out those same activists became later in life, 10 years later, some of my closest people.
That's amazing.
Those professors were teaching her in high school. So a lot of it wasn't me. It was like what was the energy that we were drawing in or whatever it was, but I was taught, really well.
So let me ask you this in your own words. What are you fighting for as an activist?
Liberation of our people. I want to end, I want to, with the movement, I can't do it myself. Hell no, I ain't even trying to imply that I'm going to do anything, but I will definitely participate and give as much energy as I possibly can to eliminating the oppression that harms my people today and would harm my kids and my nephews and nieces in the future. I want to make sure that they have a much more liberated future, that they are centered. What's up?
Police brutality is something that has long troubled you, and it's troubled you not just in the world, but how it's portrayed in Hollywood. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. I think state violence is like parental abuse, right? Like, you see these people that are so much more powerful than you, so much bigger than you in in concept, right? Like I'm a baby, you know, I'm 1, 2, 3 years old, and I'm looking at this giant human. There's an easy disparity of power. And when they abuse that power, it becomes very confusing. And that's your relationship with love, right? That's how you define it. And that is what oppression is. Like, you have these people in the responsibility in the position of responsibility to care for and govern people, and they have no intention in governing. They have no intention in factoring in our wellness. It's a job for them because of capitalism and all this other mess, right? That informs our society every day and how we operate. It's profit first, right? It's, you know, it's abusive. Police are put in a position of supposedly security and safety, and then make us less safe. They haven't ever made Black folks safe. So we haven't ever had that association like, man, I sure do love me some police. Wow, I feel so much safer when police are around. No, I don't know any Black person, and when they do, if somebody did, then I'd be like, okay, like, who paying you? All right, coonery. But I think like that is, you know, something that I always saw. I saw the abuse of authority by the government, whether it's, you know, a cop or somebody, a cop equivalent, right, in the government. It's I saw the abuse in school. I saw the targeting of folks. I saw how, like, why do we have cops in our school? I saw people, you know, that I rode with be beat up by cops. I was, you know, they pulled guns on me and told me all kinds of shit. One time accused me of stealing my mama's car, found her ID. She's white. So they were, listen, I ain't ever had nobody be like, well, you're white. I talked about this earlier, right? Right. You know, you're white. I see this mom of yours. Y'all look so much alike. It's crazy. Just gonna let you go. You know, it was literally like, oh, this is the owner of the car. We got the same we have the same middle and last name. We have the same address, right? Like, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. He was like, oh, so okay, this your mom, right?
Your mom, right?
Yeah, and was legit like, I'll shoot you. I'll blow out your kneecaps. You try to run.
Wow.
You know, had a gun pointed at my head. And all we were doing, me and my cousin were sitting in the parking lot waiting for the car to warm up. That's it. You know, and in a gated parking lot. So they came into a gated parking lot, you know. So I didn't ever have good interactions with the police. And it was very clear that there was a distinction between how they treated the white kids and how they treated us. And when I got to LA, I moved to South LA, which is the Black in LA. Did a lot of before now, where how they're gentrifying Inglewood and all these other places. White people would not venture down there. There were beautiful areas there, you know, and there's not so beautiful areas, right? But my people were down there, and I loved it. I miss it. I don't live there now. I had to move in to be more convenient. It's inconvenient. I would drive in every day and get pulled over at least once a week.
Oh, wow.
Driving into the city. And you know, I didn't ever have a good relationship with cops in Houston or LA. So when I saw the abuse, when I started working with unhoused folks here in LA, and I saw the abuse from cops, and started, you know, digging into
educating yourself about
budgets and stuff. Yeah, exactly. I found my central the central cause, right? That the oppression comes from state violence, and dedicated myself to ending that.
Do you remember the moment or the event that caused you to think, I'm going to move from the sidelines to being in this
fight? So it always came in phases. I always thought about what I'm gonna speak out on now. I did my best to pick my battles. I wasn't great at it back then. I'm working on it much more now. I'm better at it now. I'm still working on it. But yeah, I was just like, I mean, you can't fight everything. Um, wait, what was the question exactly?
Do you remember the moment when you said, I'm moving from the
Yeah,
sidelines and
I don't think that,
theoretical position to
yeah.
active?
I mean, I don't think, I don't think there was a one moment, but I do remember several. I remember that kind of lined up and there were the bigger, like Trayvon Martin, right? Like,
Yeah.
and confronting white supremacist violence and then tying in police brutality to it's no different, right, than this white supremacist violence when it came to Mike Brown. And then they started piling up. But those two in particular was when I went from, because I used to feel really, I don't think I've ever said this before. I used to feel really like I used to talk about my faith. I used to talk about God. I used to talk about values
Mhm.
publicly. And I felt like that was risky
Right.
back then. Like, and I was like, I realized it wasn't as risky as I thought
Yeah.
because people would accept that
Yeah.
and be like, you're so brave to talk about your spirituality in public. But then when I started talking about Trayvon Martin, ain't nobody said nothing.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, where's the support? And then when it came to Mike Brown, it was even worse. But I saw some of my people, I saw Logan Browning, I saw some folks, Darnell, that I hang out with now, that were like, I want to do something, and would find, any way, like to, protest or whatever. They wouldn't go out and necessarily, I'm not saying everybody was out in the streets back then, right? But, they was like, what can I post? And I would always be like, well, I see their fear. And I'm not talking specifically about Logan or Darnell, but any people that I saw some
Sure.
sort of fear of posting, I would say, well, you know, in my mind, my people are dying, and it could be any of my people any day, right? I've already had people
Mhm.
killed by police and many different types of violence, but um in that time, I was thinking, if I don't speak up, if I don't start, you know, people
Acting.
are gonna. I'll put it this way: people are gonna die whether I speak up or not. If I could prevent, if my speaking out could prevent at least one or mitigate some damage, then I have to. I have no choice. Otherwise, I'm complicit in some way in staying silent. And so I also saw how other people were intimidated and scared to say things. So I wanted to open that up for them. Like, you don't have to say the what I'm saying, but at least you have me out here being more radical than anybody else and giving you
Mm.
permission to say at least something.
So let me ask you this. Other actors have taken the position, I can give money. I can give money, I can donate. You have taken this, I'm gonna be out on the streets. Why? Why not
Yeah.
just donate? Why not just,
Well, you gonna be donating regardless, right? So
yeah,
if either you get out on the street and start speaking publicly, you might miss out on some money. There's your donation. You either donating time
sure.
or, and if you have the resources, don't get me wrong. I have a organization and a company, and both of them run on money. So if y'all want to give y'all money, let me tell you, it's a great thing. I can tell you exactly where to give it. Because we need the money.
Build
We trying to
power.
continue to work. And I realized that in the movement, a lot of people are like, problematic money. And then we don't have anything to sustain ourselves.
Mhm.
Now, you have to be careful what your money is attached to, but still, I'm like, we do need the resources. So don't get me wrong. Give your money, because we do need the resources, but we need the resources right? We need action in there. And the streets were, I was not giving any money because I ain't had none.
Mhm.
Uh, so I mean, what was my option? I was like, I got to get out in the streets. And I started again. That that's 2013, something like that,
Mhm.
2014.
2014, 2014.
Yeah, I think Trayvon was killed 2012, and then it took off 2013 in the trial, and then I think Mike Brown was 2014, I believe,
Feels like an
or
endless.
15. And yeah, and so I would have been in LA almost 10 years by Mike Brown. And the first time I was introduced to, homeless shelters and such, um, I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot about how the systems operate and how philanthropy operates. And I learned what Band-Aids are, right? Like the philanthropy is a Band-Aid. I didn't know the difference between grassroots activism and philanthropy. It all blended together for me. And now I have empathy when other people come to me like, hey, that's crazy that you're nonprofit, and can't differentiate necessarily between, donating and philanthropy and those types of that type of engagement and getting out in the streets.
Organizing.
But I did realize that philanthropy sometimes was a part of the problem, and that the shelters and the services that they were getting there, while they're necessary, we're not getting to the root of the problem. And so I started looking at the root causes of poverty and what that, and that was also where I developed my passion for mental health. Aside from my brother's struggle and mine and my family's, I saw a lot of my family in these shelters, right? I was like, that's my family. That is struggle that they're dealing with mentally. That's the struggle. And I'm like, I can see and empathize with these folks because they are my family in my mind, right? Like I see my direct family members. So I have to get involved, started doing research on the root causes. And that's what led me eventually to, oh, this is what's happening, right? And state violence is real. And part of extracting from our community, part of that violence is extracting from our communities to the point where we have to have people that are unhoused, and then the abuse that comes from that, and then state violence, police, and that was the journey, I should say.
Has your outspokenness had an impact on the trajectory of your career?
Sure.
Does that,
some of it I don't know, to be honest. I think a lot of it I won't. I think a lot of it is going to be, conversations that are had in private. Like, well, I mean, Kendrick might be really great for this role, but is he gonna have a problem with the, like it could be simple as that, where they're like, I don't know if we need the headache. We got 2 days to cast this.
do you worry about cancel culture?
Yeah, we all worry. I think we worry about it. I worry about it, but not like, I mean,
not enough to change your.
I haven't ever been perfect. I haven't ever been. I'm not the type. Sometimes I have to remind myself, like, I'm like, man, people are gonna think when I say this or something like that, and then I'll be like, oh, I forgot. I really don't give a fuck. Like I'm like, I forgot who I am. What? I don't. Who you do? And you care? Nah. After I found out my purpose, now I'm willing to be held accountable. But I thoroughly vet my purpose, right? And behind things. And once I'm out there, I'm like, okay, I don't do a whole lot of things spontaneously. A lot of people thought, like, we talked about how a lot of people think that we popped up in 2020 as an organization, started posting flyers, and people came out to the streets, and that's how protests happened. It's like, nah, we had been building relationships with grassroots organizers who had the infrastructure for protests for years, right? There is a process to it, and people don't see a lot of that process.
You said, with that all in mind, about the process and your involvement, that there can be no revolution without art. You've quoted that. So as you talk about this, the commitment, the weighing up, the trade-offs, what do you see as the responsibility of an artist in the fight for change, particularly in this moment?
Connect that. So the question you asked before.
The question is.
Before that.
The question asked before that is, do you worry about cancel culture? Do you worry about losing out and your career being impacted by your work? But at the same time, you have said in your quote, but there can be no
Yeah,
change
yeah, yeah.
without art.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, for others who are listening, how do you sum up that responsibility for artists as you see it in this moment?
Yeah, I think that's where I was like, there's a connection between those. I think that's where my purpose grounds me, right? That's when I'm like, I thoroughly vet my purpose. I
Mm-hmm.
have a rubric, right? My values: wellness, creativity, liberation, inclusion, and power, right? And I have questions with that. And I question myself to hold myself accountable. I have advisors to hold myself accountable. So when I make a statement, when I'm putting things out there, I am grounded in my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I have thought a lot about communication. I've thought a lot about what the most effective ways to communicate things are just in life, because when we're hiring people, when we're trying to form teams, when we're trying to work with people, find out who our best collaborators are, we need a rubric. We need to figure out what do we like? What do we, how do we work well together? Whatever it is. And so I think once I get to that place where I'm, trying to communicate something very effectively, I always come down to obviously my strength. I believe my strength as a storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
is as a storyteller, whatever. Um, and everybody has their strengths in communication. Some of them lack. but everybody has something. And I think mine is definitely storytelling. And I see that how people are affected with art, that art transcends, right? And I think, and I know, I believe, and I know in my heart that art is the best form of communication. It's the most effective communication, whether it be storytelling, music. It always pierces through visually, that there is a spiritual, metaphysical element to it that is beyond just words and statistics. And that is where people become connected to things, when that different element, that beyond the physical element, really penetrates
Sure.
through to their spirituality and connects on a spiritual level. And I think that's what art does for the revolution. It makes people think differently. It catalyzes things in them.
Okay, I get that. But let me ask you this. The question is now, how do you distinguish between performative activism and the real deal that is actually moving the cause along, that is affecting change? Because that is something that obviously, as you know, someone in the public eye, that's what you and others who are trying to do this work get tagged with. Oh, it's performative. Oh, it's not the real deal. How do you distinguish between the two when you're looking at it?
I think it, again, not to beat it over the head, but I think it boils down to purpose, right? I'm super grounded in my purpose. I'm always thinking, what is my intention here? Right? Like, is this self-serving? Is this, that's the accountability. I have like a series of questions that I ask myself about taking certain actions, right? And especially when you're someone like me who has no problem with confrontation, right? Let's talk about it. I'm always like, and I'm not, confrontation in the general sense. It's not just fighting. It's like, hey, I want to confront this right now so that we can get it out the way, and have a much healthier relationship. A lot of people like to move around and skirt around and, figure out their entry point. I'm not great at that. I'm like, let's shoot through here. This looks like the easiest point the easiest route from point A to point B, straight line. And so I think a lot of people don't understand, like back when I was didn't know the difference between philanthropy and grassroots. They think that this is a good way to feel good. And people are taught that, hey, you do it because it makes you feel good, not because of the other person. What? No, that's a benefit maybe, but you do it because the other person needs something, right? You do it because it's right. You do it because you have access to a resource, and your whole purpose here is to live in harmony and community. That is a very healthy ecosystem, the key indicator, one of the key indicators of a healthy ecosystem in, you know, in the world and on Earth, is diversity. It has a whole lot of diverse types of vegetation and such, right? So when it's all uniform, one crop, that's actually what a lot of people contribute to climate change, right? Was domestication and making sure and changing ecosystems, changing whole ecosystems to fit our needs. That's selfish, right? So if you think about what the ecosystem needs, what the community needs, what the collective needs, it's not ever about you, because you can't live on this earth by yourself. You got to eat, which means there's got to be plants. You got to, you know, and animals. You got to make sure, you know, whatever it is, forming safety systems. You cannot do it by yourself. So I think a lot of people get caught up in like making themselves feel good and doing something good, and instead of the purpose behind it and how, you know, how you want to end things, what the vision for your your loved one's liberated future is. It has to be connected to a liberatory purpose in my view.
I cannot let you go without asking you. I've got a couple more questions before I let you go, so I'm going to tie you to that chair just for these few more questions.
All good.
Build Power, your organization that you co-founded. Talk to me about its mission, its very specific mission, and how impactful it's been.
Yeah, I mean, our very specific mission boils down to realizing and reimagining a liberatory future for our people, right? That is, I mean, from whether that's reimagining in the organizing room and the table and trying to figure out what this next protest looked like, you know, that we're going to amplify and whatever with our partners, or creating, you know, PSAs and short films and now long form content, you know, that amplifies the issues that, you know, and paints the picture of the vision of what the future could be and what a liberated future could look like, or educating people on the pieces that give them that type of imagination, right? Whatever it is, that's the work that we do. We are reimagining. We, you know, I used to be like, if you work in Hollywood and you call yourself a creative, then you have a responsibility to be at the forefront of that reimagining. If you're not imaginative, you don't belong, you don't deserve to call yourself a creative. And then I thought about it. I'm like, Hollywood is capitalism. So, you know what, let me not try to, I try to, you know, pull people along and shit, but it's our job. I don't want them to reimagine my shit. I want us to reimagine our shit. And so we gonna take on it. We're not waiting on nobody to take on that responsibility. We are reimagining, and we're working on what that imagination is, what that vision is for a most liberated future for our most marginalized people and the people that we love most in our lives.
And impact? Are you having impact?
We are. That's what I was gonna say. In reimagining that, right, we also are taking on the task of realizing that future. So in the community, I mean, we're known, we have produced things and such, but we're known usually for being in the streets, right? Like people don't even know that we work in Hollywood. Some of the people in the community come up to me and they're like, oh, that's that activist, something or another. They have no idea that I'm on this, any show or anything like that. So we want to continue that authenticity, and that is the work that's central to everything that we do. We are creatives and we love storytelling, but also, you know, that's our central work is in the streets. And people, that is the realizing of that's we're actually venturing into building and looking for places in Houston to create jobs and job pipelines and stuff. So we got a lot of shit coming up. We're about to do a big launch, 9/22.
Okay.
So
don't bring it here. We'll all be watching to see that, you know, looking forward. Obviously, midterms are coming up. What is your sense? How much faith do you have in the political system that it will be supportive, or it is something you can look to as you reimagine?
Girl.
Okay. I had to ask the question.
Man, Joe Biden just doubled down on funding the police. Fuck all of them. I don't know. I can't, like, I literally for the life of me can't the pulse on the culture right now. I don't in terms of politics and such. And I will very clearly be like, fuck Biden. I think it's I can't stand any of the other Republicans. I think the whole shit is trash and should go down in the dumpster fire if it hasn't already. And we're just watching the burning and smelling all the trash that comes from them. That is the culmination of the white supremacist history of this country. And it's happening on so many levels. Now there are a bunch of like really dope progressive folks, grassroots organizers, and some folks like Cori Bush that, you know, snuck up in the system and are really, really working on changing and transforming and doing some incredible work despite all odds, because they're fighting their own party and other party, the dumpster fire. And so, you know, I have faith in them. I have faith in the people. I do not have faith in the government. I just don't. And I don't think I should. I think that there are leaders that we can categorize outside of government in terms of, hey, I know Corey cares about us, right? Hey, I know whoever it is. Tarsha Jackson, right, in Texas. I know Tarsha cares about her community. She grew up there, she struggled there, and now she's a city council member, right? But she was an organizer. So I have faith in people. I have faith in my people. I have faith in, you know, the ability, especially after 2020 and seeing so many people in the streets yelling the same thing with the same vision, because we were forced to sit and look at our situation and say, what's the solution? Now I believe that a lot of us know the solution, but we're so busy trying to survive and get through this traumatic time that we don't have the capacity, the emotional capacity to invest in certain things. And I'm, you know, pushing through that. Now for these election season, I'm gonna do my best to have a lot of joy for us, right? And plan a lot of joyful moments for us through our org and some other things, so that, you know, it's not completely torturous. But I know that it will be a tough season, in election season, and it's hard for people to even pay attention right now. But there's some scary shit happening. But it's like lost in the news cycle, right? So I see that happening. I don't have a pulse on what the elections outcomes will be, but I do know that it's going to be a struggle. So I'm like, listen, as much as we can breathe and I can put out tools to be mindful and healthy and well while paying attention to what's going on, turning up, you know, getting people to vote, you know, and use it as a tool, and understand it's just a tool. It is an important tool. It's a tool, though. It is not the end result. It ain't gonna get us free, but it will, you know, help us mitigate a lot of the damage. And we need that right now, because a lot of damage is coming down the pipeline. So I want to make sure that for this election season, we're just having safe spaces to pay attention, you know, and love on each other.
I'm seeing something strange on our screen saying network bandwidth is low. So it seems back. So I'm going to sum up my final two questions for you. What is the most important lesson you've learned as an activist? I want you to answer that for everybody listening.
I mean, I'll say two. Leave it better than you found it, and the movement moves without you. Those are the two that are probably my favorite to talk about. So, you know, leave it better than you found it was, I saw in a bathroom with this one of my boys' grandmas, and she was just basically like, if you piss on the seat, wipe it up. But in my mind, I was like, whoa, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah, that's
so
deep.
I have preached that thing through Hollywood, through Texas, anywhere. I'm like, and people are like, well, I think that's Boy Scouts or something like that. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, this is how you apply this to every aspect of your life. And then when it comes down to me by myself, if I'm by myself, I'm room by myself, I have to leave myself better than I found, right? So that is one that I think is an easy rule to go into every room, every conversation, and leave it better than you found it. Because there's a process. You need to assess what it is right now and how to make it better. It sounds easier than it is. And then the movement moves without you is one of my favorite too, because it reminds you, one, that the work is going to continue whether you're in it or not. So don't let the lack of resources and the extraction of resources from those systems that will create that transformation that we really need discourage us. We don't have to put everything in, like, deplete ourselves and completely sacrifice ourselves in order to. And if you go to the Bible and you talk about Jesus said, don't do it. I did it for you. For the Christians, like, hey, chill. Like, we don't have to kill ourselves in order to keep each other well. And we shouldn't have to, especially if everybody else plays their part. The movement will move without you. Somebody's always going to do the good and important work. It's going to get done. So don't wear yourself out. And at the same time, I love the flip side of that coin, which is the movement's going to move without you. So where do you stand right now? Are you part of the work? Are you doing part of the work? Are you participating? Or are you sitting on the sidelines while the movement is doing what the movement should do? Are you healing and resting up so that you can participate in the movement? Or are you healing and resting up to try to avoid your participation and your accountability?
That is a wonderful place to leave it. And those are important questions that everybody listening should take a minute to consider. Kendrick Sampson, it has been such a joy, such a pleasure to spend this time with you and to learn from you and be inspired by you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And I appreciate your questions. It was a great conversation for sure.
Thank you. Be well, my friend. Be well.
You too. You too.